Howdy folks, Jarek Defiler here to talk about being a limpy piece of crap that gets your ass kicked all the time only to get up, wipe off the blood, and keep coming back for more. That's right, we're talking about being the abused underdog, in a gaming sense anyways. Now I've been a gamer for many moons, going back to the 90s, hell even the 80s technically with my Atari 2600, and mainstream gaming was a very different beast back then. First-person shooters would throw you into the fray within seconds of starting up the game. Real-time strategies would have you being raided by enemies within a matter of minutes. And RPGs found you digging through pages upon pages of strategy guides just to find out where to go next or who to talk to because there was no quest markers, roadmaps, or compasses hovering over your head pointing you in the right direction. No, you would only be given some vague hint or comment and left to seek out your own adventure. Naturally, there were exceptions, but most of the time, games were designed in this way. But as time went on, things started to change. I feel it was the early 2000s when you had Halo come out. It ushered in this more overt idea of being the hero. Now don't get me wrong, you were almost always the hero in most games before then, but Halo really made you feel like a feared god slaughtering your way through enemies of alien warriors that were scared to death of you. Other first-person shooters like Doom had that same mentality, but unlike Doom where you had a hefty difficulty curve with things like no health regeneration and scarce ammo forcing you to use everything in your arsenal, standard Halo made you feel almost invincible as it mixed up the genre, ushering in the modern FPS era, which was awesome because it was different. But in doing so, we began to see all these imitators move in that direction until it got to what we see mostly now in mainstream games overall, you being the chosen one. What's wrong with being the chosen one, you might ask? Well, nothing really, it's all subjective in the end I suppose, but what I don't particularly care for is how it's implemented. Generally, in these games that treat the player as such, you are godlike right out of the gate. Take a look at most mainstream FPS titles over the past few years. In campaign mode, you are basically an unstoppable beast that just slaughters their way through enemies without so much as the slightest expulsion of rectal air due to the most minuscule of physical exertion. There is often no ramping up, strengthening, or learning skills from the character's standpoint, or even that of the player. It's just being a god right out of the gate. A gate god, if you will. Now, some titles do this intelligently. The aforementioned Halo is one example, same as the latest Doom titles. But the thing is, with those games you are still required to learn mechanics and ramp up a bit as you progress, be it via discovering new weapons, or upgrading traits, or whatever. Because if you don't, then you're going to find future fights very difficult to handle. In titles I do have the problem with, you're just godlike throughout. Sure, there are difficulty settings that make it more challenging, but most of the time you can just sit there looking at the enemy without a care in the world because they can barely hit you or you just regenerate all your health like 3 seconds later. Try doing that in Doom and see what happens. No mobility equals death. But let's take a look at where I mainly want to focus on this topic. RPGs, my favorite genre. Whether it comes to the story, character customization, skills, traits, passives, NPC relationships, or whatever, RPGs used to always have you start at the bottom of the barrel. You were often a very weak nobody that, through hard work and dedication, would eventually become a godlike entity plowing your way through enemies. But it took time and skill. Let's look at some comparative examples. Morrowind and Skyrim, Elder Scrolls 3 and 5 respectively. Both are among my favorite games, but for different reasons. And when it comes to being the underdog, they both treat the player completely different. In both games, you are considered the chosen one, the Nerevarine in Morrowind and the Dragonborn in Skyrim, but you find this out in very different ways and at very different times along your journey. Both titles introduce you as a prisoner. In Morrowind, you find yourself on a ship that just left a prison island where you were freed, while Skyrim has you wheeling in on a rickety cart with other prisoners that attempted to cross the border. Once you customize your character, and in regard to Morrowind, build your class and select your skills, you're let loose to explore the world or continue the main quest line. This is where things begin to split apart. In Morrowind, once you leave the office inside Anine, the character creation portion of the intro, you are on your own. This takes all of 5 minutes, give or take. And then the game thrusts you into the open world with nothing more than rags and, well, whatever you stole in the office. But here's the thing, you are weak. Super weak. You're slow, can barely jump, have no charisma or bartering skills when talking to people, and the most basic of enemies can give you a run for your money. You have to spend hours leveling up your abilities by fighting, trading, training, or simply running and jumping around to increase your athletics and acrobatic skills. It's not a perfect system by any means, and it could use some tweaking and forgiveness in how quick you train your abilities, but it's still a lot of fun because you get to feel your character getting stronger in real time, and it's very rewarding due to you essentially earning it. Personally, I love Morrowind's leveling system, but I completely understand how it turns some people off, especially in this day and age. Now cut to Skyrim. For the first several minutes, you don't have control of your character outside of being able to look around. After you customize your looks, you are given a 15 to 20 minute hand-holding tutorial on how to do all the basics in the game. You're sent on rails past this big explosive spectacle of a dragon attack and frantic chaos that ensues while virtually having everything done or pinpointed for you. It's basically super hard to die as well, outside of overstaying your welcome, because they can't have you feeling like a loser, right? No, not you, you're the gate god. In Morrowind, if you attack someone in town after leaving the office, or are caught stealing, the guards will impale you with spears in an instant and leave your corpse rotting in the swampy gray sun with no one knowing your name. And that's awesome. Skyrim, not so much, at least not at the start. It takes quite some time before you get to the point of even being able to attack. Even further, when it comes to combat in Skyrim, at the start you're a great fighter. There is no training or learning phase in Skyrim. You simply get a weapon and start swinging and you win 90% of the time, even on its hardest difficulty. And you can only go up from there because leveling your combat skills grant you options to pick some fairly powerful traits. There really is no underdog moment where you feel weak. In Skyrim you just feel poor, and that means something. There's a reason it's not remembered for its combat, and that's because it just isn't rewarding because 1, it's not very good, and 2, you don't earn it. Still love that game though, even vanilla. Don't care what anyone says. When it comes to the story of the two Elder Scrolls titles, the underdog element is prevalent there as well. In Morrowind, you have to go quite a ways into the main quest line to discover that you are in fact the Nerevarine, or the Chosen One. And in order to get to that point, again, you have to earn it by fulfilling these various prophecies. It feels organic and fluid, and by the time you get up in rank and skill in various factions and whatnot, you know you've earned the title of Nerevarine. This takes dozens of hours to achieve, on average anyways. Shoot to Skyrim and you're just the gate god. Within an hour or so of the main quest line, you know you're Dragonborn and you can cast this powerful shout. Sure, you have to do some traveling and quests where you slowly follow these dudes walking around talking to you for years, but it can still be done within a couple hours. You know you're the chosen one so early on that it feels like you don't have to do anything story-wise because you're already top dog, which is why the vast majority of us simply leave Whiterun and then go do all the side quests and exploring. I have played probably a few thousand hours of Skyrim over the years, and I have literally only completed the main quest line once. I have only done the Greybeard's quest I think like 2, maybe 3 times because there just isn't any real incentive for me outside of getting the full shout that I rarely ever use, to be honest. You are never the underdog in Skyrim really, and that's unfortunate. So why would I bother continuing on a quest where I already know the outcome when I can just explore the world and make my own adventure? And one last thing I'll mention that ties into this idea of being the underdog with these two titles is that of factions. First, in Skyrim, there's 15 joinable factions to Morrowind's 17. Granted, like 3 of Morrowind's factions are required for the main questline, you don't really do anything special in them. But the factions in Morrowind are one of the things that make it one of my favorite games, because it's political and intriguing. Morrowind's factions can ravish me every which way if they wanted to. Anywho, if you join one faction, you may become hostile with another just due to affiliation. You may have people attack you randomly in the wild if they know you're in the opposing faction, but here's the thing, you have to earn the faction's respect and interest before you can even join, let alone rise in their ranks. If you want to be in the Mages Guild, for instance, you have to show adequate sorcery skills by leveling them up and completing quests for them and whatnot. And this is true for every faction. You join as a nobody, and eventually, with hard work and dedication, you can rise to the top. And the faction quest lines are long. We're talking dozens of quests per faction spanning over several cities and quest givers. Some are almost a game in and of themselves, really, and the fact that you can't rise in the ranks unless your appropriate skills are leveling with said rank makes it feel like you're earning it. Why would the Master of the Thieves Guild have piss-poor lockpicking skills, or the Archmage of the Mages Guild have crap spells? They wouldn't. So Morrowind makes sure you're properly prepared to achieve those titles. It's an immersive and great experience, because again, you start off at the bottom. Maybe not necessarily an underdog in this perspective, given that you aren't competing against anyone in the faction, but you get the idea. But if we take a look at our beloved Skyrim, it takes the opposite approach. In Skyrim, you can join all of the factions at the same time with the exception of the Stormcloaks and Imperial Legion, the 2 factions facing off in the massive civil war that's plaguing Skyrim the entire game. And not only can you join nearly all the factions, but you can also become the supreme master of each one. How long does that take? Like 2 hours. You can become the boss of nearly every faction within a few days. Compare that to Morrowind, where it would take a week or more to become the boss of just one faction due to the level and skill requirements as well as the length of the quest lines. In Skyrim, you have 0 level or skill requirements for factions. You can be a full-on destruction mage and become the leader of the Companions, Skyrim's version of the Fighters Guild. Or vice versa, you can be a bulky, heavily armored two-handed axe wielder that doesn't know barely a lick of magic and find yourself stumbling into the position of Archmage in the Mages Guild after a couple hours of running around smashing stuff and doing a few quests. Never do you feel like you earn it, never is it difficult, never are you the underdog. You are simply the chosen one meant to be the bestest and greatest gate god of the ages. Unfortunately, this takes away a great deal from the immersion of being a wandering adventurer struggling to make their place in the world, and instead replaces that feeling with a simple checklist of things you have to do to tick the boxes of completing quests so you can go on to do other quests. Everything just feels as if it's handed to you, really. Blech. Now let's take a look at another example, that of the Diablo series. Diablo 2 Lord of Destruction is my all-time favorite game ever. Me and my crew played it for roughly 8 years straight. Talk about bang for your buck. So needless to say, when Diablo 3 was announced, we were ecstatic. We all pre-ordered, nerded out, and I stood outside GameStop in Arcadia for a few hours at midnight waiting to get my copy of the super duper titanium, plutonium, gold, diamond, nuclear, orphan, blood-infused collector's edition that cost me $110. But what happened when we got it? Well, we stopped playing after a month, so take from that what you will. And on a side note, that was the day I became a patient gamer, and that was also the last game I ever pre-ordered. Anyways, Diablo 3 had a lot of problems on release. Some technical, others mechanical, and then there was what we'll be discussing here, the narrative aspect. And let me interject for 1 second and say that as the game went on, it did improve a great deal. The combat was always excellent, and in the end, Reaper of Souls did a lot to clean up many of its issues that made the game more enjoyable to the old school Diablo fans. But let's get back to the story and how it compares with Diablo 1 and 2's implementation of the underdog. In Diablo 1 and 2, you are weak. Really weak. You are not some special snowflake or chosen one, you are simply an adventurer trying your damnedest to do the right thing and stop these exceptionally powerful forces of evil. You struggle and you struggle, get your butt kicked over and over, but you keep coming back for more. You are the underdog. Remember this from Diablo 1?
Fresh meat.
Or this from Diablo 2? Yeah, that pretty much was what you were to these dudes, just meat and maggots. Now compare that to some of Diablo 3's voice lines.
So, you approach the Oculus with the aim to destroy it. You will not succeed.
Or this.
While you tinkered with your paltry catapults, my demons breached the depths of your keep. Once they've claimed the Black Soul Stone for me, your entire world will burn.
As you can see, there's a stark difference in the antagonist's approach to the player. In Diablo 1 and 2, the bosses didn't even know who you were most of the time until you got to them. They saw you as a simple nuisance, a bother, an insect that had to be squished so that they could get along with their day. You never hear from them throughout your entire journey until you're standing face to face because you're not even on their radar really. You are insignificant. You are the underdog. But in the end, you show them how this underdog can bite. Whereas in Diablo 3, you are so important that the bosses, nay, the bosses of bosses, take time out of their precious day to FaceTime you every chance they get to tell you all their plans and how you aren't going to succeed even though you're kicking their butts the entire time. Why? Because you're the super duper special Nephilim, yay! Therefore, they have to acknowledge how awesome you are and give away all their positions and tactics to you personally, because why would the ultra awesome snowflake player be forced to figure that out on their own? No struggle, no work, no difficulty really, just a gate god. There is a demonstrable injustice of telling rather than showing here, and that takes away all feeling and immersion of being an underdog that has to earn their position of greatness. Now, does that mean that it's wrong or not fun being the gate god in some aspects? No, not really. It depends on the game mostly. I just think that in order to have a profound RPG experience, you have to have a good, strong story that you participate in. And in order to have good, strong, playable characters, you have to earn it. You have to struggle. You have to work to reach that height of goddom. Otherwise, to me, it's just boring. Being a gate god is equivalent to activating cheats at the start of the game. Infinite money, all the weapons, god mode, flight. What's the point of even playing after that? What is there to strive for? And many modern AAA titles that are trying to cater to broad audiences tend to fall into this trap. I get it. Business is business. People like to feel good and special, so why not design your games around that? Well, to them I say, look, gamers aren't special snowflakes. Although we can be super whiny at times, we don't need to be coddled or handled with kid gloves. We can handle a beating and often look forward to it. We like the challenge. That's why most games have a hard difficulty mode. And when it comes to the story and narrative, give us something worth working towards. Give us a struggle. Give us bosses that are so out of our league that when we finally do defeat them, it's glorious and makes us feel all warm and fuzzy inside because we know we earned that feeling. Give us a world that doesn't care about us or tries to kill us every chance it gets. Make us earn our place. I don't know, maybe it's just me. What do you guys think? Am I wrong? Do you prefer to be the gate god or the underdog? Leave your comments below letting me know. Heh, that rhymes. Anyways, hope we can see more AAA titles in the future outside of From Software that gives us a good underdog challenge. As for now, it's mainly indie titles for me. Thanks for watching. This has been Jarek Defiler, the Patient Gamer, just wanting to be a worthless dreg once again. Please like, share, and subscribe if you wish. Notification bells right down there, as well as the dislike button if you didn't care for the video. You all have a good morning, afternoon, evening, or night, depending on where you are. Game on.